who is a organisational wellbeing expert and registered clinical psychologist, come and speak to us. And we also have Emma, our COO, who will be hosting and having a panel. So enjoy. Over to you, Jackie and Emma.
Do I need a mic?
No.
We had an event here on Monday and they were like, you definitely need mics, and I thought to myself, Jackie will. I'll stick with the mic, but Jackie, can we start? Can you give us a rundown on what mental health is, what it looks like at work, and how we can manage it?
Sure. And it's funny, in my briefing notes it said, keep this brief. People will have good knowledge of this already. So, put me on the clock. I think it's really important that we go, mental health is something that we all have, like we all have physical health. And so for me, still, when I read articles in the newspaper or I hear people discussing things online, there is this confounding of mental health and mental illness, but I think it's really important that we separate those terms out. Mental health goes from flourishing to languishing, if you want to put it on a continuum or a spectrum. And when you characterise what that looks like, if we are to be flourishing, that means I've got the skill set, the internal resources to manage life's daily stresses. So it doesn't mean I live this Pollyanna life where everything is perfect and nothing goes wrong and I'm just cruising. It means that actually if I'm in conflict or I'm managing a stressful situation, I've got an ability to regulate my mood or to regulate my distress. It means I can problem solve or think about what do I need to do or who do I need to connect with to manage my way through this. Flourishing looks like I've got a social world and connections around me where I feel like I have got support and I actually have the ability to support other people. The reciprocity in that connection is really important. The other aspect, can you still hear me down the back? The other aspect to flourishing is that I've got purpose, that I have got a reason to get out of bed in the morning and that I feel like I contribute to more than just myself. So when you think about flourishing in that term and you put that in a workplace, why is that so important? Well, you need people with energies. You need people that can think clearly. You need people, especially in your work and contact centres, to be able to recognise and validate somebody on the phone that's distressed, for example, but also stay calm internally while they're doing that. And then if it's particularly distressing, to be able to go, well shit, what do I need now? How do I get support from my team? Or do I need to do something for 5 seconds before I jump on the next call so that I'm actually calm and centred before I do that, for example? The other end to that mental health continuum is languishing, which isn't depression, it's not anxiety, it's not bipolar, it's I feel stuck, I feel meh, I kind of feel cloudy in my thinking, I've lost my drive, I feel lost in the world around me. So it's really important to know that every single one of us can go up and down that continuum. But you then think about somebody that's languishing at work, and probably that's a key gateway to presenteeism, which is my body is in the building but my brain isn't, or I'm operating at less than 50% of my capacity, which is the definition of presenteeism. And again, you then think about, well, what's the impact on your clients on the other end of the phone if they've got somebody that's not onto it? What's the strain on the team? Probably the team are having to pick up the slack if somebody is in the building but not mentally in the building. And then you then think about the thinking changes when I'm languishing. Do I start getting pessimistic? Am I cynical? Have I lost hope in what we're doing? And actually mood is contagious, and then that impacts the culture of the team. So regardless of mental illness, and one in two of us in this room will experience mental illness in our lifetime. So I actually think part of managing mental health and mental illness is just part and parcel of running a team. It's just human. But if you even take the mental illness component out of that, if we can all go up and down that mental health continuum, then it's really important for sustainable long-term performance that we have a grasp of that, we have an understanding of it, and we have systems in place and work to support that. Not just leaders that can support it, because that then becomes a mental health strain on leaders if you are the only support system managing people, but the infrastructure around you doesn't. So for me, that is why it's part of a successful business, is thinking how do you support your people, no matter where they are on that line.
Great answer.
Not so short, sorry.
I feel like you've answered all my questions already, which is a bit awkward. No. So we've got a room full of leaders here.
Yes.
So balancing genuine support and still holding people accountable.
Yeah.
What tools, like what practical tools, and what advice would you give there?
And this conversation came, Lydia rang me and she's like, Jackie, I've got all these leaders talking to me about the fact that they feel like people in their teams go, I can't come to work today, I'm anxious. Or, you know, I can't do that task, my mood's too low. And so where's this balance between really understanding mental health, acknowledging the fact that actually mental illness rates have increased quite significantly, especially since COVID. So in 2022-2023, for example, 35% of New Zealanders were living with symptoms consistent of anxiety and depression. So you take that, I think it's dropped a little bit really since we've come out of the peak of COVID, but we definitely haven't gone back to pre-COVID levels. So you look at your team and you think there's actually a genuine increase in mental illness in your team, let alone the mental health flourishing to languishing. But has there been some confusion around using mental illness or using languishing, poor mental health, as an excuse to just not show up or actually do the job? That was kind of the question posed. Is that the case? And I think probably there is a minority of people where maybe that is happening. But my viewpoint on teams is actually the majority of people get out of bed in the morning and they want to do a good job. No one wants to feel like shit. No one wants to go to work and think I did a crap day at work today. I think there is more language around mental health. I think we've got very good at supporting people around opening up conversations about mental health without actually having the systems to then support people who are in need. I think we've created a bit of an issue in New Zealand around let's talk about it, but then if we talk about it, where's the support? And actually we might not have the robust level of support we need. But for the majority of cases, I look at organisations and go, actually, if someone is saying, I'm too anxious, I can't come to work, or mental health seems to become the excuse, for me that goes, is there a culture in that team where perhaps flexibility or working with someone on an individual plan around what they need maybe isn't safe enough to speak up, so I'll just say that I'm anxious because then I don't have to have the conversation because likelihood is the support's not going to be there for me anyway. Or is it around, actually we haven't as a team sat down and had a really clear conversation around expectations about what work looks like here, about what's acceptable and not acceptable in our team, what are we actually trying to produce as a team. So for me, I go, actually, let's look systemically rather than honing in all our attention on the individuals. Let's work for the majority, not the minority, and go, have we got a really clear format of working with teams around what do we expect, what is our purpose, and what does success look like in this team, and do we all own that together? So we've got a really clear understanding of why we're here and how we want to work together. I think that's really important. I work with a lot of organisations where that's unspoken, and so people actually don't have any idea really of what's expected of them. You also think, I suppose, and we spoke about this last time I came together with Tribe around intergenerational differences, and I don't think it's all actually in an intergenerational split, but you do have a cohort of young people who are coming in that have never sat in a university lecture and who have done everything from home. And so I think, again, we can sit as leaders and go, God, that's frustrating that you don't know this, or how do we not understand that work is a contract and we both are here and it's two-way, and we can sit there and ruminate in our frustration. Or we can go, actually, let's be proactive, let's have the conversation, let's be really upfront and clear around what the expectations are. And then if things are kind of falling short, absolutely let's have conversations around being curious, understanding what's going on with that person first, you know, working out what support mechanisms we need to put in place first, and then if we still have issues we can go down a performance line. Absolutely let's train leaders to do that, but hand on heart as a business, can you say that you've got a real clarity in your workspace first, because clarity is imperative for mental health at work. I also think we then have to go, okay, if we are working to the minority, so we spot people that perhaps are taking the mickey, or perhaps maybe we think, I'd like to know more about what's going on for that person, then yeah, we need to be able to have some pretty challenging, uncomfortable, hard conversations through a lens always first of being curious first, help me understand, I'd like to know what's going on, but we have to actively address those. And again, I think what I see sometimes is leaders go, I don't know how to have that conversation. One, if someone genuinely is struggling, I don't want to make it worse. I have leaders that say, I don't want to end up in a situation where I'm PG because I'm having conversations with someone actually is distressed, so I'm just going to tread really carefully from a legal perspective so I don't get myself in hot water. And so you've got people operating then from fear. And I don't think that ever ends well when we're operating from fear. So again, for me, that comes back systemically of how is the business supporting leaders to have the skills and capability to have those conversations, to know your legal limits to those conversations, to know what's in your boundary, what's not in your boundary, and to have a good framework behind them of you don't ever have to do this alone. Like if there's someone tricky in your team that has a personality disorder, or they're really struggling with mental illness, or their performance is really low, like what's your structure around you to help you actually lead and manage that person through that?
Brilliant. I think that you talk about fear, that people are scared about doing that, and it does take a lot of bravery to have those conversations with people. How do you think organisations can support the leaders with the bravery that they need, knowing that they're supported by the organisation? So expectations is one to put away, but how can the organisation, it's got to be organisational led, to understand that you can be brave enough to have those conversations without the fear of the outcome.
Yeah. So again, I'd say there's multiple prongs to this. One, is there a clear understanding of what your role as a leader is in your organisation? Like, where does that conversation lie? Is it with the team leader? Is it with the head of contact centre? At what point do we escalate? What level of conversation do we have with what position? I think that's really helpful for a leader, for yourself, to have clarity around that. I then think it's important that you've had the training to have those conversations. Many leaders end up as leaders because they're technical experts, or they're good at the task that they're doing. You haven't had a psych degree, nor do I want you to have one, but you also potentially haven't had training on what leadership looks like. And if you've had crap leaders all through your life, then how do you kind of enter into your, I'm not saying everyone has, but I often see this in terms of, I don't know what good leadership looks like, Jackie, because I've never experienced it. Yeah. So is there good training around what leadership is, but also how you have those really, really important but tricky and uncomfortable conversations. Part of that is giving people structure to those conversations, training people around how you prepare for those, what things you want to bring to the table, what are useful questions you might ask. But there's also an element of how you regulate yourself through those conversations, because if I'm anxious walking into the room thinking, I don't want to have this conversation, or how am I going to manage myself, or how are they going to respond? I said at the start of this that mood is contagious. So if I walk in anxious, likelihood my team member is then going to become more anxious through this conversation. When we're anxious, we lose our clarity of thought. It's then really difficult to have a constructive conversation. So I think good support and training for leaders is important. So that's like one. But then I think what's fundamentally supporting that in the business. For example, someone here said, our head of contact centre's now been put on the phones again. So not only am I leading people, but I'm also doing the work, for example. And I then think, when have you got the time to have those conversations? So if somebody is struggling, for one, but also, how do we have proactive conversations about mental health and wellbeing? Because for me, that's what's going to help your team be successful and sustainable, is if we regularly check in with each other. If I have an understanding of what's going on in your world, if something particularly difficult's happened in your day or in your week, I want to know about it so we can talk about it or debrief it, or you can get the support you need. If I am flat tack leading and doing, when the heck do I have capacity to check in with 12, 15, 8 staff member, whoever many direct reports you've got? So I think there's having time from a logistical perspective. I then think it's what support mechanisms are in place. For example, if you work in a contact centre where you've got targets that you have to meet, well, do the targets come first or do the people come first? And who's running that culture? really that will come from the C-suite or the senior leadership team, and what's their messaging around how you prioritise that, how you navigate that, or if someone is struggling, what support options do you have in place to pull in for those people? Do they have the technical skills they need to do their job? Because actually if I'm in a role where I don't feel like I'm skilled enough to do the work I'm doing, or I don't feel like my knowledge is good enough to respond to people on the phone who are distressed, then actually that's stressful for myself and likely to lead me to languish or to get more anxious, because I don't bloody know what I'm doing. So actually every day I turn up and I'm feeling really anxious about that. So I think you've got to look systemically first and then go, what is the support that leaders have to actually enable that on the ground? Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. So the next theme of the next question, getting performance but not getting burnt out.
Yeah.
What are some really practical comments that you can make just about how all the leaders in this room look after themselves so that they don't get burnt out? We've spoken about expectations, we've spoken about clarity.
Yeah.
Communication, I assume, is a big one,
Yeah.
because you need to understand what the organisation is doing.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that many of us in this room have felt burnt out because of the pressure of revenue numbers versus people.
Yeah.
What comments would you feel on that? Sorry, I've gone off piste in the questions.
No, it's all good. I guess my first thought about burnout always is the canary in the coal mine, if you know that metaphor, that miners used to take canaries in cages down into coal mines, and if the canary died, then these toxic fumes down there get out. And so I think about that with burnout, because often in teams, when someone is burnt out, the solution from an organisation is take some time off. What do you need? We're going to put gym memberships in organisations, or, just have a long weekend this weekend, and it's very heavily individual focused in terms of if you're burnt out, what do you need so you can manage better? Whereas actually burnout generally is a systemic and cultural issue in an organisation. It's not because you as an individual are weak or have too much going on or haven't managed yourself well enough. So I always hold that image of the canary in the coal mine first. But anyway, I do think there is something around what I would label self-leadership actually, which is, we know, and I hate this metaphor, but it sticks with people. If you got to put your own oxygen mask on before you can put the oxygen mask on others. And I do think the notion of that is very true. Leadership is tiring. Leadership is a role where you have to continually be professional, empathise with others, validate, be clear in your thinking, where you have to have a professional front on the exterior, whereas internally you might be going, shit, you're coming to me with this problem, do you know what I've had to deal with today? Or, I just had a fight with my husband, I've got 3 kids off to school, I'm bloody exhausted, and now I have to come in and be calm to you. And that disconnect between I'm the leader and I have to be calm on the outside versus what I might have going on internally, that's called emotion labour. And emotion labour wears you down when you have to do that as a leader. So I do think there is a really important aspect of, for yourself, how do you set yourself up best? Which doesn't mean things won't be tricky or you don't need support, but we do need to be kind of filling our own bucket so that we have got capacity to hold that professionalism. So I suppose I ask leaders, we're all different. There is no cookie cutter model around exit this room today and go and do these 5 things and you'll help manage your energy. But I think it's kind of going.
There was.
Yeah, no, sorry. but you're different to me, Emma.
Absolutely.
Your background is different. Your family is different. What nurtures you is different. What drains you is different to me. And so I get leaders to take an audit kind of on their week or on their day, which is what are the things you do in your day that nurture you. And by that, I mean it gives you energy. You do a task, you feel good. You walk away, you feel energized by it. So what are the things that nurture you? What are the tasks that give you a sense of satisfaction or mastery? Because that's different from nurturing. Something might be bloody hard, it doesn't give me energy, but when I finish it and I succeed in it, I'm like, yes, I nailed that. And actually that mastery or satisfaction is really good for mental health too. So what nurtures me, what gives me satisfaction or mastery, and then what drains me? And if you have a good understanding of kind of in your day or in your week, what are the tasks that nurture, master or drain you, then you can start hopefully getting a bit savvy around, do I have nurturing things every day? Because I actually need a higher hit rate of positive to negative in my day to manage well. So have I got those things in my day at work? And if work's bloody hard at the moment, well, am I getting that outside of work? Am I doing something before I get in the door? Am I doing things after work that really build my nurturing bucket up? If I've got draining tasks, can I sandwich them with nurturing or mastery tasks on either side? So at least I don't have a whole day of being drained from 8 in the morning till 5 at night, because actually that would not be nice for any of us. So can I start being clever with how I'm structuring my day, for example, to try and at least get different moods popping up during my day? Who's your support network? Because actually leaders need their own team around them in order to do that well. So if you look through the literature, and I see this all the time, leaders who sustainably stick in like the people they work with, or they at least have an ally at work. And so I think it's going, who's got your back? Or who do you have that you feel like is on your team or who is really supportive to you? And that can help people sustain their well-being and help. It's a protective factor really against the things that are difficult or the things that are hard. You know, if you think about your team, and if you think I've got people that I'm struggling with in my team, if I've got somebody that's at my level, not my team member, I'm not going to go and debrief with someone in the team, because that's going to lead to really not okay, difficult dynamics. But have I got someone my level that I can go and say, I had this conversation today, it was really bloody hard. How would you have done that? If you were in my shoes, what would you have done in that position? Have you experienced that before? Like, have I got people at my tier that can support me? Have you got a leader that backs you? Because again, that's a really critical factor around self-leadership and prevention around burnout. And hopefully you do. But I've also been in the game long enough to know that not all of you will have that. You'll be expected to lead your people, but no one is leading you, or no one is looking after your well-being. That's tricky if you're in that position. And then I think you've got to get savvy. Well, how do you create that support for yourself? Is there someone else in the organisation you can go to? You know, is that around actually advocating that you go and get some professional supervision? Once a month, I'd like to go and have a 1-hour coaching session where I can debrief how I'm leading, because actually that then gives me strategies and support. So if I don't have that support, you know, from a hierarchical perspective in-house, can you get it externally? Or does your EAP provide that, for example, which might be free and you can access that? And then there's the true well-being self stuff. What do you need to live well, feel well, be well? You know, and if you look at the things that are really important, and these are your eye roll bits, but they are important. How's your sleep? What food are you putting in your body? How much do you exercise? You know, who are you connecting with personally? They are your basic fundamental health pillars that are critically important. And how much rest are you getting off a device? Because actually our brains were not designed to be online and addicted to a phone all the time. So are you getting time where you can unwind? So if you looked at yourself and then audited your life hand on heart, you rated that 1 to 5. 1 is I'm doing terrible, 5 is I'm absolutely nailing that. You know, how's your nutrition, how's your sleep, how's your exercise, how's your connection, how's your rest time? You know, and then if you go, I'm doing pretty well in some of those, but actually I've let my exercise lag, well then you problem solve around it, right? How are you going to fit that in? What do you need to be doing? Pick one thing at a time and try and work on that and see if you can really build your buffer up, I suppose, around you.
That's incredible, thank you. We have this saying at Tribe, which is just dot, and it's do one thing.
Yeah.
You can't attack all of them at the same time, and sometimes when I see that people are frazzled or just not close to a 5, it's like, do one thing.
Yeah. It's a different cognitive level. And so it's like, again, do you have tasks in your day that you can switch what cognitive load you're working at? Because that's an effective way of being productive by looking after yourself too.
Absolutely.
I think one of the things, talking about what you touched on earlier, speaking to a leader here who's expected to lead a team but also jump on the phone.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is something that we're hearing all the time.
Yeah.
If I talk about design time, like I'm terrible at design time.
What is design time?
It's blocking out time in your diary to go, this is
To not do emails,
Yeah.
to not have meetings,
to just,
To do
to
practical.
get to do,
To do things. Okay.
to
And-
unpack and to plan so that you go in meeting the pillars that you need to meet to make sure that your well-being is where it should be.
Yeah, okay. As a leader, and I'm probably talking from personal experience, and I imagine there are a number of leaders in here that if my team are on the phones, I can't take half an hour out to do design time. But I know it's important for me to recalibrate and fill my cup in order to support my team, to
Yeah.
make sure that they're well. So do you have any tips for leaders who almost feel like they can't, but it's really important to them to be a great leader, to give themselves permission in life?
I have a question to everybody. Like once a year, do you have a position where you can get your call centres off the phones to do like training together or team planning together, or is that viable or never going to happen?
Leaders or frontline?
No, like your teams, frontline, and you, as a team.
Yeah.
Some of you, yes. Those of you that can do that, I think there is huge value in bringing that conversation to the team about, again, what's our purpose, what does good look like, success look like, and what do we need as a team to enable that, and actually bringing that conversation to the floor. And then being brave enough as a leader to say, I know I need headspace and capacity to lead you well, but sometimes I feel so guilty for doing that I don't. You know, talk about that. What do you need? This is what I need. This is what it's going to look like. And the reason I'm doing that is because. And then you've got the transparency and the clarity that comes with that conversation. So I think if you can plan as a team, that's amazing. If you can't logistically get off, I would hope that throughout the year you have times to have one-on-ones with your people, even if it's quarterly at the least. Would that be the case, that you get a one-on-one with everyone? Then I would say, you know, in one of those conversations, have a proactive conversation with your person in your team around, you know, what do you need at work to work well, you know, and to have that conversation with them around, if you were struggling, how would I pick that up? And then as a leader, you can say, and I want to let you know, if you see these behaviours in me, this is when I'm struggling. And actually, it's my job to be accountable as a leader, but I also would love to know if I'm showing up and I'm jumping over you to complete a task before you, or if I'm entering micromanagement territory, or actually I'm giving you permission to say, hey Jackie, you know, like give me a signal, or, you know, have some way of actually giving me that feedback as a trigger that I might need to do something for myself to manage that. But also, Lydia, I think it is really knowing you cannot pour from an empty cup, and you need a team of leaders that support each other to get that recovery. Do you have somebody at your level where you go and have a coffee once a week and you debrief how you are, and you have somebody at your level who says, how are you doing, what do you need? You know, hey, you're sounding really tired, you know, this week. What do you need this week to keep going? Or what's one thing you could do today that would shift you from a 6 to a 7 out of 10? Or ensuring that you've kind of got those support mechanisms in place. And I think it's okay to be really clear that your role as a leader is different to your role as a frontline. You aren't hopefully on the phones, and if you are, you need boundaries around when you're going to be able to have your team leader stuff. Do you structure that from a timing perspective? From 9 to 1 I'm on the phone, from 1 to 3 I'm not. You know, and it's clear and it's diarised and everybody understands and knows that. And yes, if shit's hitting the fan, you might have to be flexible and jump on the phone at a certain time. But, you know, in the majority, is there structure to help you do that? Because if I feel guilty or I feel like I'm letting my team down, if I've got a habit of pleasing others before looking after myself, actually maybe I need the structure in place around me to kind of help keep myself accountable, because I'm probably never going to put off my own whim.
Great answer. Okay, I'm going to open it up to the floor. Does anybody have a question that they would like to ask Jackie?
You've got my verbal diarrhea this week. I haven't flooded your brain.
Hey Jackie, how's it going? I've had the luxury of being part of one of your sessions historically, and something that I took away last time, and I thought if you can elaborate on it, was the amount of time that you spend in languishing, and what I think you mentioned that we can fall into some sort of mental depression purely just on how prolonged that languishing period is.
For me, I think languishing can be a gateway to mental illness, right? So when you think about depression or anxiety, what forms that? Well, there's a nature-nurture argument to that, isn't there? Some of us may have a predisposition to anxiety or depression. I look at my family history and I am the genetic underclass when it comes to mental illness in our family, and you think, all right, I might have a vulnerability to that, but maybe the environment switches that on. And if I'm languishing for a certain period of time, or if I'm in an environment that's not supportive, then actually maybe that kind of flips the switch, I suppose, on anxiety or depression. Or if I'm in a position of low energy and loss of purpose, if I'm there for too long, at what point, as you say, does that transition? Does that thinking start to become rigid? Does that lack of energy start to cross home, work, friendships? So I think you can think of languishing as a vulnerability or a gateway into anxiety or depression or other states of mental illness. I think for me, when it comes to supporting people, I really look at what can we do preventatively and proactively. Organisations for a very long time, probably because they haven't known what to do, or the research hasn't been there, or the resource hasn't been there, has been either ambo at the bottom of the cliff of we support people when they're struggling, or we just send people external to EAP and we don't look at it in-house. So we go to tertiary support of flicking people out. I don't know how to deal with that, go and see somebody else, rather than internally looking at, well, what do we do to set up systems so that we prevent people from getting into that space. And so when I think about that continuum, I go, what are we doing proactively every day to help people get up the flourishing line rather than being in languishing? Because that has, I think it's the best bang for your buck in terms of where you're putting your resource, and if you've got people that are flourishing, if they are able to concentrate at work, if they are able to engage in work, they're more likely to get positive feedback from work, which then is a upward spiral. It's so much better if we can go preventatively. How do we get people up that line? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I don't know if I have.
No, you have to.
Again, you've answered about 10 questions and more. But we've got time, everybody, for one more question. So does anybody have anything that they would like to ask? Yes?
Okay.
Okay.
What
You
do
can
think
project.
is the key to maintain engagement and morale with the leaders?
With leaders, only one.
Only one? Engagement.
I don't have just one. Okay. You have to know why you're there. You have to know why you're there. You have to have your own passion around your purpose about what good leadership is and what successful leadership is. So as a leader, have you spent the time, or have you been given the time to go, what actually is good leadership, and how would I know if my team is succeeding? What, and is that about output, or actually for you, connected to your values, is engagement and leadership seeing somebody develop in your team? Is it seeing someone's confidence grow? Is it having a team where your tenure in your team is actually kind of longer than the average because you've got people who enjoy their teammates, are loyal to their team, want to be at work? I trained a team of parking wardens. Can you imagine that as a job? And the abuse and the vitriol and the awfulness of going out and giving people parking tickets all day? They were the most engaged team I had almost worked with in 12 years. I couldn't believe it. Why? Because they had a leader who believed in them individually. He introduced time where the leader before him had them on the clock, so there was no time to debrief as a team. They came in, they picked up their uniform and off they went. He started introducing 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon, when they took 20 minutes to set the day up as a team, and they got 20 minutes at the end of the day to debrief if anything had happened to them out on the streets. Structural systemic changes that engaged the team in their work, and in turn engaged him. because he wasn't there for the council, he was there for his people, and for him that was his engagement. That team was like a family to him. He believed in them, he saw their confidence rise in the work being engaged in a team, and that kept him going. And so, you know, I suppose it is, what does leadership mean to you? And what are the things you need to put in place to help you realise that? And is it about strategic output? Is it about your team? Is it about, you know, coming to work and feeling like you've made a significant difference? What is it? Define that for yourself and have really clear, I suppose, parameters for you around how you would know you're being successful in that role. Be somewhere that aligns with your values, with your passion, and if you're connecting with good people, that will keep you engaged.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
And it's nice to have you back.
Hope it was worth getting out of bed for.
Sitting in Auckland traffic.
I hope it was worth coming up from Wellington for you, of course.
And look, I had a conversation with someone earlier, and we spoke about why do we put on these events, and hand on heart for us, it's actually to get a group of people in similar roles, similar challenges together, to connect our wider tribe, but actually to hopefully add value and for leaders, for you to be able to walk away and go, there was a lot to unpack there, but here are a couple of things that I think are going to help me. And as leaders, we give so much, and I often think what's coming back and who's my support structure, and we often talk about that drive. So we're really grateful to have you here with us this morning. Feel able to say there's tea and coffee and food.
Can I add one more comment?
You can.
I didn't finish your question well enough.
Okay, cancel all meetings and phone calls until midday.
No, my last comment is you can't just have it on the leader to stay engaged. Who are your leaders and how are they responsible for your engagement too? Because actually you need to be seen, you need to be valued, you need to be recognised to stay engaged. So it's just not on you. Sorry, Liz.
No, that's okay. Well, I think that